Hello again and welcome to class. This video is part of the Audiogram of the Day series where I complete a new random audiogram using the class simulator and post it for you all to watch. If you like what you see, please hit subscribe to support the channel. So I'll just go in here, check random audiogram, and I'll click start practice, which will make a brand new random audiogram. As always, I can click show true to sneak a peek, and we'll do this at the end to see how well I do on this audio. So I'm going to be using keyboard shortcuts to speed along the process, and so I'm not just clicking all the way back and forth, but you can use the buttons manually if you want to. So here we go. I'm going to start in the right ear. I don't know if there's a good ear or a bad ear because I'm going blind. So I'm just going to start presenting and see where it goes. Okay, so the program automatically requires 3 and 6K to be tested, so that's why I'm doing the testing at 3. And I'm also noticing there's a pretty big jump in between 1000 and 2000 hertz, so I'm going to go back and do that testing at 1500 as well. Confirm it and go. Yeah, so anytime there's a 20 dB gap between adjacent frequencies, like here at 1000 we're at 40 and at 2000 we're at 60, you're going to want to test the in-between frequency to just see the interoctave to see if that slope is right on, or maybe maybe at 1500 it happens here, so they've got this 40 dB level hearing out to 1500, and then it really starts to tank. So we'll start a little bit above and try and find out exactly where this threshold. Here it's a little bit more shallow of a slope, some worse hearing at 1500, and it is rising up to be a little bit better over here. Yeah, I'm just doing the standard modified Houston-Westlake procedure. I'm going down and checking it. When I get a double check, if I get the presentation right twice, I'll save the threshold, and then I usually go back and work my way up to just confirm a third time. But that's, I guess that's an optional thing. You don't have to do that. You can just check it twice. The goal is to get 50% at least correct, and so yeah, that's how that's going. We're done with the right ear air conduction. I think we did all the interoctaves that we were supposed to, so we're good to go there. Let's do left ear, and I'm going to assume that it's somewhat symmetrical, and that'll probably bite me here, but yeah, there we go. We're going to get this super non-symmetrical hearing loss. I picked my starting level assuming that there might be a symmetry, and so I guess that proved me wrong. Check that. And so here you can see between these two frequencies, there's only a 15 dB gap going from 5 to 20. So I don't have to test this in between interoctave frequency. So if you're curious about why I did that in the right ear and didn't do it in the left, that's why. Now, some people, when they test the interoctave in one ear, they'll go ahead and test the interoctave in the other. And that can be helpful when you need to mask. If you've got the non-test ear thresholds, then you can make sure that you're choosing the appropriate, correct masking levels and things like that. So it wouldn't hurt to go back and do that, but it's not really necessary to do that. So right away, I'm looking at this and I'm noticing some things that these two audiograms are mirroring each other pretty closely, that there's this sloping in the right, but it's also sloping in the left at a much lower degree. So I'm thinking that this right ear might actually be loud enough that that sound is crossing over and actually being heard in the left ear. So we'll have to check our air conduction thresholds and see if we'll need to mask those. Because I think the difference is just about right to need to be masked for air conduction thresholds. So you need to mask for air conduction when the difference between ears is greater than the interaural attenuation. In this case, we're using TDH50 transducers, so our interaural attenuation value is going to be 40 dB. So anywhere there's a 40 dB gap between the air conduction thresholds, we know we're going to need to mask air conduction. Technically, crossover hearing happens through bone conduction, so we're going to need to do bone conduction to really determine if we need to do air conduction masking. We'll compare the air conduction threshold of the test ear to the bone conduction of the non-test ear to see if we need to cover up that signal at all. So I can already tell right now that even just comparing air conduction, we are going to need to mask some of these, but it's on the fence for some other ones. Like I don't here going from 0 to 35, that's not a 40 dB difference, but the bone conduction might be slightly better than the air conduction. There might be a small air bone gap here. And if that's the case, then we might need to mask this anyway. So let's go ahead and do bone conduction so that we can figure out exactly which thresholds we need to mask from air conduction. So start in the left ear, that's our better hearing ear. Then we'll save it and switch over to the non-test ear and save it in the non-test ear as well. And there's some debate on whether or not that's ethical to do or not, but if we're assuming a 0 dB interaural attenuation, then that is an appropriate thing to do. But you should always be transparent if you actually tested the threshold versus if you just implied the threshold. So some people will use an up pointing arrow. Some people will use the left and right arrows to indicate that the threshold should be the same. And so there's some debate about how that should work. If you've got feelings about it, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. We're not going to test at 250 or 6 or 8. Bone conduction starts getting reliable. There's a lot of distortion at those levels, so we'll just skip it. And we'll combine the audiograms again here. You can see that there's no significant air bone gap between the bone conduction scores and the air conduction scores for the left ear, so that we can feel confident that that's a sensory neural loss. And we can also feel confident that these bone conduction responses are coming from the left ear, not the right. So now we can use our formula to decide if we need to mask any of these air conduction thresholds in the right ear, and then we'll go ahead and mask up the bone conduction. In real life, you would want to make sure you do all the masked air thresholds before you take off the transducer and put on the bone vibrator. But for the sake of the simulation, we can switch between our transducers as easily as we want to. So I'll kind of show you that process how I would go through it if you could switch transducers a million times and do all the testing optimally. So let's look at the different thresholds we have. We're comparing the air conduction to the bone conduction of the non-test ear. We didn't test the bone conduction, so we're just going to compare air conduction here at 250 and at 6 and 8. And so here the difference is 30 dB, so the interaural attenuation is 40 dB. That difference is not greater than the interaural attenuation, so we're not going to need to mask this low frequency 250 threshold in the right air conduction. And same thing here, our bone conduction of the non-test ear is at 0, and our air conduction is at 35, so we can feel pretty confident that that doesn't need to be masked. And looking at the 1000 hertz, the non-test ear is at bone conduction is at 0. We're testing in the right ear right now, air conduction. And so looking at this, the non-test ear bone conduction is at 0. My air conduction threshold is at 40. That difference is equal to the interaural attenuation. So just to be safe, we're going to need to mask this one. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's turn on our masking and we'll get at the right frequency. We'll start, our starting presentation level is the air conduction threshold that we found originally, and our masking level is going to be the air conduction threshold of the non-test ear plus a safety factor. So we've added our 10 dB safety factor. We're going to present, no response, present. We're just going to increase until we get a response. Then we raise our masking, and we're going to just keep raising our masker until we get a plateau of 3 or 4, and then we can say that is our true mask threshold. We probably, just based on needing to mask this threshold, will probably have needed to mask that air conduction threshold at 1500 too. We don't know what the true threshold was. We could go back and find it, but just using an, eyeballing it here, we could say that it's, best case scenario 10, maybe the bone conduction is at 5, and we're at 55. So that should be high enough that we'll definitely need to mask that too. So we'll just kind of say, well, here's where the threshold should be if I had measured it. I'll just go up some safe factor from there, and then present and no response. Go until I get a response, and then I'll plateau that out, and then save that threshold. Looking here, we're at 60. Our non-test ear bone is at 20, so the difference there is 40 dB. So I'll start at the unmasked air conduction threshold, put the masking in at the non-test ear air conduction threshold plus a 10 dB safety pad, and then increase until I get a response, increase the masker, increase the stimulus, increase the masker, increase the stimulus, increase the masker until I get a nice plateau. We'll do the same thing here, 70 compared to 30 non-test ear bone conduction. Then we'll add our safety pad, and we'll go up from there. We're just doing some plateau masking. I get my final value. From here, we'll go up 10 dB, because 80 compared to 40, that's a 40 dB difference, and the same thing for 6 and 8. Comparing to the air conduction threshold, so we'll need to mask that as well. A lot of hearing loss here in this right ear. So we'll do the 10 dB safety pad. Our 10 dB safety pad, present, and go up, up. Increase the masker, increase the stimulus, increase the masker, increase the stimulus, increase the masker, increase the stimulus. Okay, so we've got a no response here. We can't test at the level that's high enough to get that response. So there's that. We tried to plateau, and the transducer won't let us go. You can see it flashing, so we get a no response down here in this far corner. So now we are looking at our thresholds here, and we see that our bone conduction really needs to line up better, or it might be conductive and it might not be. And so we need to mask these bone conduction thresholds in the right ear. We'll go resplit it up, switch our transducer to be bone conduction, and we'll turn on our masking at the air conduction of the non-test ear plus a safety factor plus the occlusion effect, because we're doing bone conduction testing. And so we've got that transducer plugging up the air conduction, the outer ear, which creates this occlusion effect to provide the masking. So there's no occlusion effect at higher frequencies, so we don't have to add anything extra here. So we'll just go up until we get our response. And this could be really tedious. If this loss is sensory neural, then there's so much of this up 5, up 5, up 5, up 5, and especially if we're going to get a no response anyway, that it takes forever. So I'll show you that there are some tricks you can do when you feel like you've got a really long way to go on masking. You can just, instead of going up in 5, you can go up in 15 dB steps. And you might have to backtrack a little bit to find the true plateau or find the true threshold, but you can get pretty close pretty quickly. So here I'll add the safety pad. There's no occlusion effect at 3000. I'll present, no response. So I'll go up until I get my first response. And then I'm going to raise the masker by 15 because I know that it's probably far, far away. Then I'll go up, present and no response. Oops, I shouldn't have saved that threshold. We'll clear that. And so there's no response, so I'll go up in the signal by 15, get a response. We'll just go up by 10 this time because I'm getting closer. Go up by 10 this time and I get a response. And now that I'm closer, I'll go up in 5 dB steps and see if I can't get a little bit of a plateau. I can't, so I'll say that as a no response there. Here we should be getting to the point though where we can get a response. So it's still no occlusion effect at 2000. So we'll present here. What am I doing? Yeah, so we'll go there. Presentation level at the unmasked bone conduction, masker at the air conduction of the non-test ear plus a safety pad plus the occlusion effect. And then raise the signal until we get a response. Raise the masker. 15 and raise the signal 15, raise the masker 10, signal 10, and then we'll go up in 5s until we find the true threshold. Okay, there we go, we got a plateau there. I just realized now that I never tested the bone conduction unmasked here. Whoops. So we'll turn off our masking and do that. Okay, and then we'll turn our masking back on. We'll recombine these so it's easier to do it. And again, we kind of have to guess here. You know, we're assuming our air conduction of the non-test ear is either 10 or 15. So we'll be conservative and say it's 15, and then we'll add a safety factor there. And then we'll go up by 15, and then up by 15, up by 10, up by 10. And then up by 5s now that we're closer to where we expect it to be. And there we go. So we'll drop down to 1000 hertz, and here we're going to start having to add some value for the occlusion effect. So we've got our original unmasked bone in the right ear at 0, and our unmasked air conduction of the non-test ear at 5. We'll add a safety pad, and we're using TDH headphones for the masking, so we'll add a 10 dB interaural attenuation. Again, in the program, you can customize that value to be whatever you want. So we'll present, 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 until we get a response, and I'll go up by 15, and then 15, up by 10, up by 10, and now that we're getting closer, oh, and so look at that. We are already on the plateau, so I might be off on this threshold because I tried to use that shortcut. And to really get back at it, you know, we'd have to go plateau up, but I'm okay accepting a little bit of error. It looks like this is going to be a kind of a weird loss with a low frequency conductive component, which is unrealistic, but if you're doing a random audiogram, who knows, it could happen. Or maybe they've got this steeply sloping loss that's even more steeply sloping than it looks like, but they happen to have otitis media too. So I guess it's not too unrealistic, but it's pretty unusual to see something like this. So we'll add our 10 dB safety pad plus a 20 dB interaural attenuation here. And yeah, there we go. So wow, a big old conductive component in the low frequencies. I think that does it here. Let's show the true audiogram and see all the things that I messed up. Oh yeah, that's interesting. So I totally got it for between 1000 and 2000. I saw that 20 dB gap in the unmasked air conduction, and then when I masked it, I forgot to double check. And so when I masked this 1000 hertz tone, yeah, this is my bad, I spaced it, but hey, that's what it's all about. It's all about learning from our mistakes. When I masked this, the difference between 500 and 1000 ended up being 20 dB. So I really should have at that point said, well, hey, if this true difference is 20 dB, I'm going to test that interoctave and get a better feel for what's going on at 750. And then because we did that cheat at 1000, I actually went up in 15 and then 10, but because there was a conductive component, I overestimated that. And so that 10 dB cheat at the end got me off by 5 dB. I can live with that. I'm okay being off by 5 dB in this simulation. for the sake of showing the cheats and tricks that people use in real life. So hope this was interesting. If you have any questions or if you would have done something differently, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to see more content like this. I'll see you next time.